Hello and welcome to The Curators, a podcast about game projects on Kickstarter. I'm Joey.
And I'm Marcello. You can find all the games from this episode, as well as plenty of others, at our curated page at kickstarter.com/Gamerati.
You can also find links to each of these projects in the show notes of this episode at thecurators.gamerati.com. If you're a backer of any of these projects, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at thecurators@gamerati.com. Tell us why you're backing a certain project, and we may feature your email on the podcast.
Joey, I'm from 1980. From when are you?
From when am I? I am from 1982.
Okay, so we both kind of probably have the same memories about like on video games or rented old VHSs. I think I've seen a theme for the episode today.
Oh,
Let's
yeah,
start with
absolutely. So the game that I want to talk about this week is called Mega Metro City. It does have an 80s theme, though the reason I actually want to bring this one up is because it's a 10-day Kickstarter. It showed up a while ago, and I believe I talked about it because I backed it originally. I did back the first one, which is why I got all the updates for it so I could come and bring it to the next Curators, because when they had it on, I want to say they were at the same time as a couple other big ones. They had like to compete with Nemesis and one other that's actually eluding me. There was kind of a conversation about how people were trying to not back this one so that they could afford Nemesis or afford something different. I feel like that colored the perception of the project manager for Mega Metro City into thinking that they had to get this done as quickly as possible while there was no competition, which is really honestly kind of selling themselves short, in my opinion, because I think this game looks amazing, and I think with that sort of communication, you're kind of telling people, hey, come and get this sort of game that only is really good when nothing better shows up. This game is clearly good on its own right, and I think that some creators have a tendency to kind of like not want to compete or be afraid to compete and tell their backers, hey, we have a better game here than those other games. The truth is about this hobby that it's a pretty expensive hobby, and we as gamers spend unreasonable amount of money on these games oftentimes because...
Yeah, too much money.
Well, I only say unreasonable because oftentimes we don't get them to the table as much as we would like because we have so many stinking games. Like, I have hundreds of games, and so many of them only see the table once or twice, which is not a good return on investment for those games. I spent $60 on a game I played twice, and I would love to play it again, but every single other game is screaming at me for its attention, so I have spent too much money. That's my problem. However, the games themselves are worth our time and are worth our money because they are great games, and I think Mega Metro City is one of those games that you have to understand that it is a really good game. And it looks like a really fun experience. The basic concept of the game is that it is a beat-em-up, Bad Dudes or Double Dragon or the original like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade, even like the Simpsons arcade game back in the early 90s. This game plays on a conveyor belt, and that's like the main shtick of this game. And I've seen this only in one other game that kind of had a similar feel, but I feel like this one did the whole concept better. And so I was really waiting for this one to come out because I wanted to see it. Now, the 10-day Kickstarter limits me to not actually be able to back it because my paychecks don't line up. And so I can't afford the $120 to get everything, even though that's what I want to do. I would really like to get everything, but I can't afford the $120. I can't even afford the $95 to get everything but the expansion. So unfortunately, that 10-day Kickstarter thing has made it so that I can't back it. I have to wait for retail or maybe do a late pledge or something, but that does mean I'm going to miss out on the 48-hour early bird bonus, which is a new hero. So, and I'll talk about him in a second, but the game progresses on these 4x4 game boards, essentially. So you've got like a basic game board. I don't want to call them a punch board. It's like an actual board of a board game. You get the 4x4 grid, and when you and your allies, the other players, progress towards the right-hand side or left, it doesn't matter which direction you're actually progressing in the game, and you beat up all the dudes so that one of the 4x4 grids is empty, you slide the one that isn't empty over, remove the empty one, and then add a new empty one, and then populate new guys on the new one. So that you're constantly moving down the street the same way you would in Double Dragon or any of the other games that I had mentioned. That alone, for me, kind of sold me on the game. I didn't really go through and look through like exactly how beating up enemies went until I was already ready to back that without even looking at the actual gameplay. But the actual gameplay is also really cool looking, and it looks really amazing. There's tons of dudes on the map. I want to say there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 total different enemies to fight, and I say 5 because one of them got unlocked through stretch goals. And there's 4 good guys with 2 more unlocked during stretch goals. There's 1 big boss with another one being unlocked through stretch goals. And they're just blowing through these stretch goals, to be honest. There's a lot of other like little bosses. I want to say 4 of them. There's a lot of different tokens for like energy. You have to spend energy to play cards. The cards do special abilities like classic Street Fighter style moves like Sonic Boom and other different abilities. This Kickstarter is very, very long. The page itself is long, and so I'm trying to scroll to find some of them. Oh, the Sonic Boom is called Sonic Blow. Then there's like a nuclear suplex and even like teleporting around the board and stuff. And your character, you kind of build them as you go. So they get experience points in the game. They get stronger as the enemies get stronger. You pick up items that can be used, like a bat or a metal bar that gets used only a certain amount of times before it breaks, just like the old school games. All kinds of stuff. Like this just plays exactly like you would feel like one of those old school beat 'em ups actually should, but in a board game form with just turn taking and stuff. This is really the only thing that's kind of different. You also get these like establishment tiles that are like little offshoots. So you're playing on this ultimately, I want to say 8x4 grid that is a conveyor belt. So you're kind of focusing on the 4x4 section, each half of the 8x4 grid. But at the top part of the grid, because the whole thing is kind of isometric, so the top part of the grid, or I guess you say north side of the grid, has walls, like building walls, whereas the bottom side does not. You are looking down on the street from the same isometric view that you did for those video games. And some of those have doors. Some of the walls have doors to enter like an establishment. And the establishments are little 3x3 grids that are like a pizzeria or just a little alleyway that has a really futuristic looking motorcycle from a specific anime that is legally distinct from the actual anime I'm mentioning. You may know what I'm talking about. There's another one that's like an arcade. There's a whole lot of 80s references in here. Speaking of that motorcycle, there is a very particularly large robot head that is legally distinct from robots that you may be aware of from the 80s. There's a white hearse that has been repurposed with sirens and a little ghost on one side. There's a DeLorean in one of these that is clearly referential to another 80s reference. And that extra 48-hour Kickstarter exclusive bonus if you back within the first 48 hours, which, I'm sorry, if you're hearing this for the first time via our podcast, it's way too late. We probably won't be able to get this out within that time frame.
And you missed a Teenage Mutant Ninja Reptile.
Exactly. Actually, I would say he's probably in his early 20s. Mutant Ninja Reptile.
Teenage mutant martial artist, adolescent, pubescent,
amphibian
martial artist, amphibian.
Well, he has a blue scarf on his head, or a blue mask on his head. He is not wielding katanas, which I'm just saying randomly. I don't know why he would be wielding katanas necessarily. And he's clearly like a monk class for beating dudes up, but he's very cool, and maybe you get that reference, maybe you don't. There's also, in the expansion, there's a hero called a cyber cop, who is clearly referential to somebody in 80s culture, who you're going to have to look at the Kickstarter for that, because I called him cyber cop, but he's very referential to someone else that you might be thinking of. There also comes with extra bad guys that are called stress bots. They stress me out. And a boss called the Banhammer, and there's all sorts of really cool stuff in this expansion too. So I highly recommend you check this one out. You may have like 3 or 4 days left by the time this recording actually hits the interwebs, and I hope you've got the ability to back it, because it looks like a lot of fun. I wish I could. I just ultimately cannot. I really wanted to when it came back on Kickstarter, but I had heard that it was such a short thing, so I was like, if it's gonna be super short, I really genuinely hope it's within a time frame that I still have the money for it, but I just don't. So I hope nobody else is out there like me that's kind of was wishing this was more of a 20-day Kickstarter, but that is what it is. The shipping for America is $20. They're shipping this in Spain, so like Spanish shipping is actually only $6, which is pretty cool. And the rest of Europe is actually a little high. The Eurozone is $18, but the rest of Europe is $25. For USA, it's only $20 or $19, but for the amount that you're getting, that's actually completely reasonable, I think. I know a lot of backers are kind of like, if it's more than $10 for USA, you're doing it wrong. And it's like, dude, there's a lot here. This is a massive box. It's got a ton of plastic and a ton of cardboard and cards. And I mean, it's got big boards in it. Like, think Formula D. Like, they're big boards that you're going to end up putting together here. This is a heavy game. This is a huge game. I think it's 100% worth what they're asking. Ooh, man, it keeps shooting up. Every time I look at it, they're at $93,000 right now with 828 backers. This is still within the first 48 hours, of course, so they've got 8 days to go. And they only asked for 59,000, so I mean this is easily going to clear 100. So they'll probably by the end of this maybe even clear 200,000, which who knows what they're going to do for the total stretch goals. This should be really interesting and a lot of fun.
So let's keep our 80s vibe and go from beat 'em up video games to VHS rented in the middle of the weekend. Halls of Horror. Survival horror turn-based board game for 1 to 4 guests instead of players. Anyhow, it's from, I cannot pronounce this name. It's from Krakow, Poland, Maciej Mlinek. Yeah. Well, actually, he's the face of the project, but it's a team of people from iFun for All. They were developing an app game, but in order to better develop the game, they made a board game version of the game so they could visualize it, like in the team, while they were building the game. They liked it so much that they kept it for a couple of years, and now they're releasing it. They're finishing the project and releasing it as a board game. Still 28 days to go, so they just began. They still, they need 45,000. They are at $9,255 US. So yeah. House of Horror. It's a house, a gigantic house that you create with cards. I don't know how to describe that because the size of those cards that you use to create, quote unquote, the tiles in Brazil is called card size.
Are they just standard size? Are they like a standard deck of cards? Or if they're taller than usual, then they're usually called tarot cards.
We often buy them to use in schools and for you to write little snippets.
Oh no, you're talking about they're about the size of a note card.
Yes, thank you.
That's what we call them here. It's note cards.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Brazil we call them the equivalent of note cards, but we use the word card, which is weird. Anyhow, 1 to 4 players are trapped inside a murder house. The master of a ceremony, which starts as the very engine of the game. There's no players. In the beginning, at least. More than 50 cards. You have a deck of 54 cards of those note card size cards. And you randomly build a house, a 4x5 house. All those rooms are unrevealed at the beginning of the game. But you and the other players, up to 4 players, are trapped there with a killer. There is a Outlast reject with a hockey mask hunting you guys with a machete. And this is not a cooperative game. It's a competitive game. There are 2 keys hidden inside the house somewhere. You need 2 keys to break free and get out of there. You don't have to compete with your other players if you don't want to. You have to explore the house, explore the different rooms. You have to be aware of traps. You have to look for items that you can use, and you have to flee the killer who roams about killing everybody. And if so it happens that you can't find 2 keys by yourself, or there are no 2 keys in the game or something happened, you can attack one of your fellow players because the crazy dude that trapped, or lady that trapped you guys in the house, they anesthetized you. They knocked you out and sewed 1 key inside the body of each player. The game has plenty of combat. It comes with a lot of stuff. Besides the killer and the 4 victims, you have a deck of 54 room cards, 24 item cards that you can find. You can find med kits and you can find knives. There are 43 Master of Ceremony cards that you flip to see what happens next. There are reward cards that you can find or trade inside the house. There are penny cards, action cards that you use for your actions, like move, because you have to have cards to move, like to move from one place to the other, to search, to attack. You have to have those cards in your hands to use them, so you kind of deplete them. There are the combat action cards, the participant sheets. I was under the impression that the miniatures, the plastic miniatures, were only for the deluxe game or as an add-on, but it's detailed here as part of the base game. So 4 miniatures. Rule summary. And there's another twist that I liked very much. The first person who dies assumes the role of the Master of Ceremonies to do weird stuff inside the house, control the killer, and kind of becomes an evil dungeon master. The first person who dies assumes that role. And there is a special deck of cards for solo play, because you can play by yourself. That's one of the reasons I suggest the game. There is also a total of 137 tokens inside this box for locked rooms, to change the results of dice, ammunition, exhausted rewards and room tokens. A lot of stuff here. And 22 six-sided die. This box is going to rattle when you get the mail. You can get, as an add-on, a dedicated soundtrack, which is interesting. Just like on the game you suggested, Joey, the visual reference for exclusive soundtrack is a cassette tape. You can add a dice tower. You can add...
Hold on a second. I want to go back and talk about the cassette tape thing, because Mega Metro City actually has, for their turn taker, if you take too many turns, the game is over. It's a cassette tape.
So there's an actual cassette tape.
Yeah, and I went and actually counted the tokens in Metro Mega City, and there's 132. So 137 in yours, and 132 in mine. Let's see if we can keep this rolling into the next game too, but continue.
My next game has a lot of stuff inside it too. So yeah, there's a lot of extra stuff. You can get the STL file to 3D print your own miniatures. The base board game is $49, plus all unlocked stretch goals. There is the Scream deal that comes with the soundtrack, a Pixel deal that comes with the files for printing your own dice tower and tokens, etc. There's a lot of stuff here. It's a grim game. It's not colorful and upbeat like yours.
Well, and that's for those that aren't able to look at the actual video that we're doing. It is surprisingly colorful for what it is, to be honest. It's not the grim, dark, tan palettes that is everything. It's actually very stark blues and reds, which I think is really kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. Gives it a kind of 80's neon vibe.
Yeah, totally.
Of those. I remember when a friend would arrive in school and quietly tell a couple of people, and I've got a copy of, I don't know, House of the Dead 9. Something like that. And we would all watch, hidden by our parents. We couldn't watch those things.
No, of course.
It kind of reminds me of that. So let's see it again. Halls of Horror, 28 days to go at the recording of this on the 16th of May. 202 backers, almost 10,000 already. They need 45,000. Let's make this a reality. I did not talk anything about shipping. Let's see shipping here. Shipping costs will be charged after Kickstarter ends the Pledge Manager. I love when people do that. I don't have to pay shipping right now. You end up paying 2 installments practically. In my case, the game is 45. Shipping is also 45. So there's a shipping chart here. For the European Union, it's going to be between 15 and 17. For Poland, $6. UK, between 15 and 17. USA, between 16 and 20. Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico, $50. Canada, $30. Rest of the world, between 40 and 75, always. They don't ship. They ship to Brazil, but they won't ship to Iran, Iraq, Syrian Arab Republic, Timor-Leste. Why not? But they ship to Brazil. Let's see how much for Brazil if it's pre-calculated.
No, it shouldn't be pre-calculated if they're doing it afterwards anyway.
Okay, let's go to my last project, which is Space Invaders, the board game. Okay, that's it. That's it for another episode of the show.
For show notes, you don't have to say anything. Actually, you kind of do. Like, is Space Invaders a single-player experience the way the original Space Invaders was? Like, how are we going to actually translate a super classic 40-year-old, by the way, video game into a board game? Tell us more, Marcello. Tell us more.
Yeah, this game is beautiful. It just started, and they needed $45,000. They got almost 75,000 already. 1,620 backers. I didn't know that. It's 40 years of Space Invaders. This is not a solo game. It can be. You can play from 1, 2, 3, or 4 players. It's the Space Invaders experience on a board game. You have your little tanks, shooters. Up to 4 players can play at the same time. They are small, translucent tokens. There's those barriers that I never knew what they were on the game, but they're here. They're made of plastic. And you have a set of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 rows of cards with the symbol of the aliens, of the Space Invaders. Each row has a different color. It starts with pink, then blue, then green, yellow, and orange. And then up top, it's the UFO that I have to hit at the end. I'm always curious on how do people translate video games into board games. In this case, they separated each player turn into phases. So you have a research phase, an action phase, an energy transformation phase, and then the cleanup. In the research phase, you can use your resources because every player has a set of cards with actions. You use your resources to spy on some cards, the cards on the board on those columns and rows. You can see what's in them. Because if you shoot them, you activate them. That's why you have the symbol of the little aliens. It's just like the game. You shoot them and you destroy them. But sometimes stuff falls from them. It can be new technology, new resources, or it can be traps. So you can look at them. Nobody else gets to look at them, only you. And you leave them there. If it's a trap, you can activate it. If it's a new technology on your action phase, you can shoot at them. And then you have access to them. So that's why the colors are different. To shuffle them and put them in the correct color row, because they go increasingly more powerful and more destructive as you approach the top of the board where the UFO waits. And then you have the research phase in which you have kind of an energy budget and you use it to develop new technologies to put onto your hand, like electromagnetic pulse or gravity thrust, more power for your cannons, etc. When the game ends, when somebody shoots up the UFO, you tally up your points. And it's very simple. It's to be reminiscent and kind of an homage to the old Space Invaders game. What 612 Games here want to do is to make this game go into retail. So you can see the Kickstarter as a pre-order with a discount because they intend this game to be 25% more expensive, like the MSRP be 24% more than this when the game goes to store. So the game is only $30. It's a simple game. There's a lot of cards here. I think it's like, remember when Target released the adaptation to Oregon Trail?
Oregon Trail was pretty bad, though.
Yeah, I have a copy of that game. It cost me, I think, $12?
Yeah, it was pretty cheap.
Why would you buy that? If you were a fan of the old Macintosh Oregon Trail game, there's no other reason for you to buy that. But this game, I think it has legs. I wouldn't say this is a filler game, but a lighter game instead of playing, I don't know, Mansions of Madness, you could play this.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so it's only $30. Comes with the board, the tokens, the bunkers. Oh, those are bunkers. I never knew what those things were. The clouds that stop you from being shot. Let's see. I'm 39. So a 35-year-old mystery has been solved. It comes with 4 color cannons, the UFO, made of wood, 55 invader cards, 187 action and energy cards, and a sorting tray. $30. If you want the deluxe version, you have to fork out $75. It comes with a magnetic lock box that is numbered, and has something called spot UV coating. What is that? Spot UV coating.
I want to say that the little guy will glow in the dark. The Space Invader on the front will glow in the dark. Also, the Space Invader is different. He's blue on the deluxe edition instead of the purple one, which I think is just he's a different design and a different Space Invader overall.
Probably goes in the dark. And the playmat is made of neoprene. The game tokens and bunkers are made of ABS plastic. The cannons and the UFO are colored translucent acrylic. The invader cards and the action and energy cards are made of thicker, glossy cardstock. It's a hefty difference, but you are paying for better quality materials here, pretty much. Shipping and handling is going to be detailed in the Pledge Manager. North America, between 10 and 25 US dollars. It depends, maybe Canada, maybe Mexico. Asia, 15 to 30. Oceania. Yeah, I seldom see somebody saying Oceania. 20 to 35. And Europe, between 15 and 35. Diorama. You can get only a diorama instead of the game. You can have one with $110 shipping.
Have you seen the diorama?
No, I haven't.
It's in there. You got to look for it. It's got all of them as acrylics. So it's got every single Space Invader is made of acrylic. Every single thing in it. There was. Yeah.
Here it is.
And it's backlit, and it looks like an arcade cabinet. It's got the original art from the arcade cabinet. It's really cool. It's a really cool collectible if you have like an amazing, game room that has maybe an old school arcade.
Is it signed by the creator of the game?
You can get a signature, but I didn't see exactly how you got that when I was looking for it. I only perused this one, but I know that there's an image of Mr. Nishikado signing the diorama reward, so maybe he will sign it. Each diorama. Oh yeah, I see the signature on the right-hand side of the GIF.
Yeah. By the way, it doesn't ship to Brazil. I didn't want this anyway.
Oh yeah, you did.
Yeah, who am I kidding? I wanted this for $30.
Unfortunately. Yeah, it's a pretty awesome game though.
Mm-hmm. We should say this. It's the first project of this company on Kickstarter, at least. 612 Entertainment. Let's see where they're from. They're from Santa Monica, California. Oh. So yeah, Space Invaders, the board game, 29 days to go. They are almost twice what they needed originally. So yeah, I'll keep an eye on this anyhow in the months and years to come. Can I pledge only $1? They don't have the $1 get some kind of print and play version.
Yeah.
All right, Joey. I think we ended our trip down 80's backlit alley.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, how old are you, Marcello? What year were you born?
I'm 39. Yeah, I'm 39. I'm from February 1980.
Okay, yeah, you're only 2 years older. I'm actually July, so I'll be 37 this year. But we remember a good portion of the 80's. I mean,
yeah,
I definitely remember playing Space Invaders, though my favorite arcade of that era was, in fact, Missile Command. So if somebody's making a Missile Command board game, better get on that. But I do like me some Space Invaders, and I've always loved how ubiquitous it has been for 40 years. It's older than us, dude. The game is older than us. Isn't that amazing? It's just so cool.
Yeah, it's a way of feeling old, but in a good way.
I think, wow. Yeah, I get it. Absolutely.
You kids these days.
Yeah, back in my day, we didn't have board game versions of our video games. We just had slow-moving video games as God intended. And no, actually, one quick tidbit that I do want to add to this, and I think is kind of an interesting concept, because when people translate video games to board games, there's always a weird challenge in making a board game interesting, because especially games of that era, but games overall, almost every single video game that is out there is essentially a dexterity game. You're just pressing buttons at specific times to do specific things. Sure, there's puzzles in a lot of games. Sure, there are games that are purely storytelling, like What Remains of Edith Finch and even the Telltale games of The Walking Dead and stuff like that. There are games that just tell stories and stuff, but primarily video games are just dexterity games. And when you're looking at Space Invaders, it's essentially just a dexterity game. It's a really classic basic dexterity game that runs on a computer. And so how do you really translate that to a board game? You have to come up with cool board game mechanics. I think they did a pretty good job here in capturing the idea of simply beating a static board and trying to get the best score, because that's really all you're doing in competing with your opponents, is trying to get a better score than them. So I think it's really cool. I just wanted to kind of say that that's a really interesting thing that happens when translating video games to board games, is having to come up with a whole new game, because you can't just make every board game a dex game, because that's what all video games really are, is dex games when you break it down. But anyway, so that's it for another episode of the show. If you have any questions about the games we featured, or if you'd like us to consider a game on the podcast, feel free to email us at thecurators@gamerati.com, and we'll answer you on the podcast.
You can also reach Joey and myself on Twitter and Facebook at Gamerati. The show notes for this episode and all our episodes are at thecurators.gamerati.com. You can also find The Curators on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
And don't forget to check out our curated page at kickstarter.com/Gamerati. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/Gamerati.
You know, technically, I'm from the 70s, because 1980 is the last year of the 70s decade.
Well, when it really comes down to it, most decade switches happen on the 5s. So, like, I remember... But they do. Like, I remember 80s wardrobe is actually early 90s wardrobe. You know, the neon-y stuff, that, like the neon that you're talking about from the second game we talked about, is very much reminiscent of early 90s rather than 80s, yet we tie it to the 80s, because that really happened between 1985 and 1995. So, like, if you remember the 80s, it's because you remember 1995, I'd be willing to bet.
You know, this jibes a little bit with something my wife loves throwing at my face, because she's from 74. She really lived, like, she was a teenager in the late 80s. She says, you were a kid. You were playing arcades. I was getting out and kissing. I was wearing micro skirts and using gigantic plastic earrings. You didn't live the 80s.
Dude, we lived the 80s. Come on.
When she describes her wardrobe, for example, it looks a lot more kid wardrobe from the 70s. So I think you're not wrong.
Right? Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.